When you opened your eyes this morning, you did not wake up as a victim of yesterday. You did not rise carrying defeat in your spirit or weakness in your hands. You woke up with intention woven into your breath and strength placed inside you before your feet ever touched the floor. The fact that you are awake is not an accident. It is evidence that purpose still has a claim on your life. Before the day could speak, before fear could remind you of what went wrong, authority was already resting on you. Too many people start the morning negotiating with doubt, asking the day for permission to be confident, hopeful, or bold. But authority does not come from circumstances lining up in your favor. Authority comes from knowing who you are and whose you are. It is not something you earn when things go well. It is something you carry. Even when everything feels uncertain, you may feel tired, stretched, or overwhelmed, but none of that cancels the authority placed on your life. Fatigue does not erase calling. Pressure does not remove power. There is a difference between feeling strong and being authorized. Strength is emotional and physical, but authority is spiritual and internal. You can feel weak and still walk in authority. You can feel unsure and still speak with power. Authority does not wait for confidence to show up. It creates confidence when you decide to stand. The enemy tries to convince you that because you feel worn down, you must also be worn out. But authority is not measured by how you feel when you wake up. It is measured by what you are willing to stand on. Every morning gives you a choice. You can wake up reacting to what happened yesterday, or you can rise responding to what has already been declared over your life. When you choose to believe that authority goes with you, the day no longer controls you. You influence it. Your words carry weight. Your prayers carry force. Your decisions are not random. They are directional. Even quiet obedience has power when it is rooted in authority. You were not designed to wake up bracing for impact, expecting struggle to dominate the day. You were designed to wake up grounded, aware that no situation you face is bigger than the authority you carry into it. Challenges may show up, but they do not get the final word. Resistance may appear, but it does not outrank what has been placed inside you. When you step into the day knowing this, fear loses its ability to intimidate you. Authority means you do not have to shout to be heard or strive to be seen. It means you move with confidence that does not depend on applause or approval. It allows you to face the day with calm strength, knowing that what tries to oppose, you must ultimately respond to the authority you carry. You woke up this morning already equipped, already covered, already empowered, whether you felt it or not. Many people spend their lives fighting behaviors without ever confronting the beliefs that fuel them. They try to change what they do while ignoring how they think. And when the behavior returns, they feel frustrated and defeated. That is because strongholds do not begin with actions, they begin with ideas. They take root in the mind long before they ever show up in habits. A stronghold is a thought pattern that has been rehearsed so often it starts to feel like truth, even when it is not. These mindsets are usually born in moments of pain, disappointment, or repeated failure. A person is hurt once, and a thought whispers, "You can't trust anyone. They fail at something important." and another thought settles in, you're not good enough. Over time, those thoughts stop sounding like lies and start sounding like wisdom. What began as a response to pain slowly becomes a belief system. That belief system then shapes decisions, relationships, and expectations without the person even realizing it. This is why breaking a habit without addressing the mindset rarely works. You can stop an action for a season, but if the thinking remains unchanged, the behavior will eventually return, often in a stronger form. The mind will always pull life back toward what it believes to be true. If someone believes they are unworthy, they will keep choosing situations that reinforce that belief. If someone believes failure is inevitable, they will unconsciously sabotage progress. The stronghold does not shout, it quietly directs. Strongholds are powerful because they disguise themselves as protection. Fear says it is keeping you safe. Control says it is preventing disappointment. Isolation says it is guarding you from rejection. But protection that limits growth is not protection at all. It is a prison with familiar walls. The mind becomes comfortable with what is familiar, even when what is familiar is destructive. This comfort is what makes strongholds so difficult to recognize and confront. The battle then is not simply about stopping a behavior, it is about challenging a narrative. It is about questioning the thoughts you have accepted as facts. It is about daring to ask whether what you believe was formed by truth or by trauma. Many people live under mental ceilings they never agreed to consciously, ceilings built by words spoken over them, experiences that wounded them, or environments that shaped them before they had the strength to resist. When the mind is renewed, behavior follows. When thinking shifts, choices shift. Freedom begins the moment a person realizes that a thought can be confronted, not just obeyed. You do not have to believe everything you think. You do not have to live under a mindset just because it has been with you for a long time. Once light is introduced, a stronghold loses its power to remain hidden. The moment truth challenges the lie, the foundation begins to crack, and what once seemed immovable starts to weaken. Cycles do not announce themselves when they begin. They settle in quietly, repeating familiar patterns until repetition feels normal and normal feels permanent. Many people assume that because something has lasted a long time, it must be unchangeable. They begin to measure their future by their past, expecting tomorrow to look like yesterday, simply because it always has. But longevity does not equal authority. Just because a pattern has been present does not mean it has permission to stay. There comes a moment when awareness meets courage, and that moment is where interruption happens. Breaking a cycle begins with the decision to stop accepting repetition as destiny. It is the refusal to believe that what you inherited, experienced, or survived must define what comes next. Cycles thrive on passivity. They continue because no one has challenged them, not because they are unbeatable. The moment you recognize a pattern, you have already taken the first step toward breaking it. Many cycles are sustained by silence, silence about pain, silence about fear, silence about unhealthy behaviors that are passed down or reinforced over time. When nothing is said, nothing changes. But when faith finds its voice, cycles lose their grip. Declaring that something ends does not mean the struggle immediately disappears, but it does mean the direction has changed. There is power in naming what has been controlling you and refusing to cooperate with it any longer. Breaking a cycle often feels uncomfortable because it requires doing something unfamiliar. Familiarity feels safe. Even when it is harmful, change introduces uncertainty, and uncertainty can feel threatening. This is why people sometimes retreat back into old patterns after making progress. The cycle pulls at them, reminding them of how things used to be. But discomfort is not a sign that something is wrong. It is often a sign that something is shifting. Growth always disrupts routine. The day a cycle breaks is not always dramatic on the outside. Sometimes it looks like a quiet decision to respond differently. It may be choosing not to speak the same words, not to react the same way, not to run back to the same coping mechanisms. Small decisions carry enormous weight when they are made consistently. What feels insignificant in the moment can become the very thing that dismantles a long-standing pattern over time. Cycles are also broken by persistence, not perfection. Many people give up because they expect instant transformation. When change takes time, they assume failure and return to what they know. But progress is rarely linear. Setbacks do not erase the decision to break free. They reveal where strength is still being developed. Every attempt to choose differently weakens the cycle's hold, even if the result is not immediate. The most powerful truth is that cycles can be interrupted at any point. It does not matter how long they have existed or how many times they have repeated. Today can be different because a decision can be different. When you choose to believe that repetition is not your destiny, you create space for something new to emerge. What once felt automatic begins to lose its control, and the cycle that seemed endless finally meets resistance strong enough to stop it. Bondage often convinces people that it is stronger than they are, louder than hope, and more permanent than change. It presents itself as an unmovable force, something that has already won and will always remain. Fear says it will always have the final word. Shame insists that the past cannot be undone. Addiction whispers that control has already been lost. Emotional wounds argue that healing is unrealistic, but none of these voices speak from a position of ultimate authority, even though they try to sound convincing. Fear thrives by exaggerating consequences and minimizing possibility. It keeps the mind focused on what could go wrong while ignoring what could go right. Shame works differently. It ties identity to failure, convincing people that mistakes define who they are. Addiction creates dependence by offering temporary relief while quietly deepening the need for it. Emotional wounds linger by reopening memories and attaching pain to the present. Each of these forms of bondage feels powerful because they touch deep parts of the human experience, but their power is not absolute. What gives bondage its strength is repetition, not truth. The more often a lie is heard, the more familiar it becomes, and familiarity can be mistaken for reality. Over time, people stop questioning the voice that tells them they will never change or never heal. They adjust their expectations downward and begin to live smaller, more guarded lives. But repetition does not make a lie true. It only makes it loud. Truth does not need to shout to be effective. It only needs to be believed. There is a greater power at work than any internal struggle or external pressure. It does not depend on human effort, emotional readiness, or perfect discipline. It operates beyond limitation and reaches into places people cannot fix on their own. This power does not minimize pain or ignore struggle, but it refuses to let them define the outcome. Where bondage says, "This is how it will always be," this power says, "This is not the end of the story." When that power is recognized, the nature of the struggle changes. The fight is no longer about personal strength alone. It becomes about alignment with something greater. People begin to realize they are not battling in isolation. They are not expected to overcome everything through willpower or self-control alone. Help is not a sign of weakness. It is an acknowledgement that freedom was never meant to be achieved alone. Bondage loses its grip when truth is applied consistently. Fear weakens when courage is practiced. Shame dissolves when forgiveness is received. Addiction loosens when honesty replaces hiding. Emotional wounds begin to heal when they are brought into the light instead of buried. These shifts may not happen all at once, but each step toward truth reduces the power bondage claims to have. The most important realization is that no form of bondage has the authority to define a life forever. It may influence behavior, emotions, and choices for a time, but it does not own the future. There is a power greater than fear, stronger than shame, and more enduring than addiction. When that power is trusted, what once seemed impossible begins to look attainable, and freedom moves from being a distant hope to a present reality. Pain has a way of trying to rename people. It attaches labels that feel permanent, convincing individuals that what happened to them says something about who they are. Failure whispers that it has exposed a flaw that can never be corrected. Loss suggests that something essential has been taken away forever. Over time, these experiences begin to shape identity, not because they are true, but because they are remembered. When pain is left unchallenged, it slowly becomes a reference point for self-understanding. Many people introduce themselves internally through the lens of what went wrong. They see themselves as the one who didn't succeed, the one who was rejected, the one who fell short. These internal descriptions may never be spoken aloud, but they influence every decision that follows. Opportunities are approached with hesitation. Relationships are entered with guarded expectations. Dreams are adjusted downward to avoid disappointment. Pain becomes the narrator, telling a story that limits growth and distorts worth. What makes this so powerful is that pain often feels personal. It does not just hurt. It feels intentional, as though it carries meaning about value or capability. When someone fails publicly or suffers deeply, it is easy to assume the experience reveals the truth about them. But pain reveals circumstances, not identity. It shows where life was difficult, not where a person is deficient. Confusing the two leads to unnecessary self-judgment and long-term insecurity. Identity is not formed in moments of collapse. It is formed in truth. Yet truth is often quieter than pain. Pain demands attention, while truth requires intention to hear. This is why many people live according to narratives that were never meant to define them. They continue to punish themselves for mistakes, that were meant to teach, not label. They remain emotionally stuck in seasons they were meant to move through, not live in. Redefining identity requires separating experience from essence. What you went through is a chapter, not the title. What failed is an event, not a verdict. Even repeated mistakes do not erase inherent worth or potential. Growth is not the absence of failure. It is the ability to learn without self-rejection. When identity is anchored in truth rather than experience, failure loses its power to shame and pain loses its power to imprison. This shift does not happen overnight. Years of internalized messages cannot be undone in a moment, but they can be challenged one thought at a time. Every time someone refuses to speak about themselves through the lens of past pain, they reclaim a piece of their identity. Every time they choose self-compassion over self-criticism, they weaken the hold that failure once had. Healing accelerates when people stop demanding perfection and start allowing growth. The most freeing realization is that identity is not something pain gets to assign. It is something discovered, reaffirmed, and lived out intentionally. Pain may have influenced the journey, but it does not own the destination. When truth becomes the reference point instead of past wounds, a person begins to move forward with clarity, confidence, and hope that is no longer tied to what once hurt them.